Is this just the greatest day? I think it might be. Mikel Arteta, new deal, new Arsenal contract in today's Arsenal News Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal News Show. Joining you every single morning, tuning in to discuss all the latest Arsenal happenings. Of course, not too much going on in terms of frequent news. It is now the end of the international break. We've made it to Friday, which is obviously very good indeed, and I hope you're doing good and well. But there was a huge piece of news yesterday that broke when we were live, so we didn't really get to kind of divulge it, discuss it, and take it all in as much as I kind of wanted to do so. And as always, I want to get more of your thoughts. I'm tempted to open up the phone lines this morning as well to have a chat with some of our listeners, for those of you that are keen. So let us know if you are keen to have a chat about that, and we might open up the phone lines a little bit later on this morning. But good morning to those joining us in the chat box. Hope you're doing good. Hope you're doing well. Paul, Glenn, Damien, Arasilki, Morgie, Arasilki's there twice. Goodness me. Keno, Rowan, Stevie, Peekahoo, Black Shine, Wilson, Roy, Amira, Tom, Aaron, Franklin. We've got Shari, and we've got Brad, Stephen, Adagoke. Plenty more of you guys and girls as well. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. It's incredibly appreciated. I hope you've had a fantastic week, and I hope you've enjoyed the fact that it is now Friday and that we can bask in the glory of Premier League football returning to action. Proper football being back, of course, in our worlds. Not too many slides. In fact, I've got two for you today. And if you would be ever so kind to drop a like on the video, that would be hugely appreciated, first of all, as always. But yes, the first slide is just to remind you that yesterday evening we conducted our Spurs versus Arsenal preview show. And you're obviously very much welcome to go and catch up on that. So I was joined by a fantastic collection of our members. Garrett, Paul, and of course Damien joined us yesterday. So go back and give that a bit of a catch up and hear our thoughts not only on Spurs but obviously on the Mikel Arteta contract and the kind of the different variety of views, if you will, about this. But the only story for us to discuss today is this one. And it is a huge story because it is finally putting to bed all of those concerns, worries, and for some people even fears that Mikel Arteta would indeed either not or indeed would sign a new contract. We have an answer, and that is that Mikel Arteta will be at Arsenal for at least the next 3 seasons, including, of course, this one, with a signature through until 2027. And he spoke, I thought, if you've not yet watched the main interview, of course, on the Arsenal website, I recommend you go and do that. His words, of course, upon signing that new deal he said, I feel extremely proud, very excited, and I'm looking forward to what is coming next. I'm proud to be where I am and have the relationship that I have with everybody at the club. I feel extremely lucky to work every single day to the good people and the ambition that we have here. I feel very inspired. I feel challenged. I feel supported, and I want to do much more than what we've got already. Together with the players and everyone at the club, we are looking forward to the coming years with our supporters who have emotionally transformed the club and the team. Our supporters have transformed individuals, and we are different now. You can tell that we are different, and for me, that is down to them. And we look forward to continuing the journey together. In that interview that he did with the Arsenal website, of course, he laid out a lot of things and was asked, interestingly, about what he is most hungry for and what he's most looking for. And I think that this might be one of the best kind of examples of where social media is at. Now, as you know, I'm not tweeting at the moment other than shows and articles. And at the moment, I'm not doing that until Tuesday. But to be honest, there is part of me that just wants to carry that on, because I tell you what, in just 2 to 3 days of not replying to tweets, not getting involved in any debates, not discussing things on Twitter in particular, and just Twitter exclusively, I feel 10 times better. And I think there was a great example of the horrible space that it has become and the misinformation that spreads so simply. And I was only brought to the attention of this by our good friend of the show, Harry Simew. It got tweeted yesterday evening by somebody who tagged me, Harry, and Harry's podcast in a tweet that said, Arteta's post-signing interview doesn't involve any mention of winning trophies or winning big. Isn't that a bit concerning? To which Harry replied, because as I say, I'm not replying to any tweets at the moment. Harry just said, yes, it does. And when you go and watch the interview and you go and listen properly to Arteta speaking, I'll read you the quotes. He was asked about what he wants to achieve and what he wants to do going forwards. And he says, I would say a lot of major trophies. But at this time, that is always us. And we are unique and we do our things in our own way. The joy of the people, whether they are the players, the staff, the board, the ownership, or the supporters, that they really feel attached to the club and how we do things. For me, this is the biggest value that any club and brand can have. Then we have to add trophies to that for sure. And we will do our best to achieve that. I mean, it is amazing to me, isn't it? How so quickly we can see this spread of misinformation surrounding a story that broke less than 24 hours ago. And I know this is just one tweet, and I'm not really exposed to too much of what's going on Twitter, but I just thought I'd share that with you because it just does go to show how quickly and how easily these this spread of information that obviously bleeds into politics and goes way further than that, and we're seeing that across with the America situation, of course, as well. But I don't want to go too far into that. But it just shows you how quickly and simply things can be changed and spread and tweaked and twisted into something that, of course, it's not. In short, I'm really happy about this. As I mentioned on yesterday's show, long form being he absolutely has earned this contract. For me, and as I say, I'm welcoming anybody that would like to jump onto the show to tell me why they feel that my point of view or somebody else's point of view is not accurate. But I just don't understand how it cannot be justified, this contract signature. He absolutely needs to earn the next one along the line by winning a Premier League title or a Champions League trophy, in my opinion. That is absolutely got to be the next step. And what I think is most clear is the way in which rival fans view Arsenal. And that is, if you're a rival fan, if you're a Manchester United supporter, if you're a Chelsea supporter, a Tottenham supporter, a Manchester City supporter, or a Liverpool supporter, those that are completely honest with themselves, that can put aside social kind of, what's the word? Just arrogance, if you like, social egos and social tribalism. If they're all being very honest with themselves, they would want Arteta gone. They would not want Arteta at Arsenal. Not in a cat and L's chance. The most thing that we want as Arsenal fans is for Eric Ten Hag to stay. We want Eric Ten Hag to stay there. Right now, I'm quite happy that Enzo Maresca is Chelsea boss. Right now, I'm quite happy that Ange Postecoglou is Spurs manager. I'm less keen on Arne Slot at the moment because I think he's doing a good job with Liverpool. We've only seen a little bit so far, but I'm less keen on that. But there is no rival supporter that realistically would want Arteta to stay at Arsenal, because the reality is that they all know that Mikel Arteta has put Arsenal back into the equation of winning trophies again. That Arsenal have never been closer to toppling what I believe to be is the most successful Premier League team, the biggest in terms of how competitive they are, how strong they are, the amount of quality they've got, the depth that they've got in this Manchester City team with the best manager that I've personally ever seen in the Premier League. And Arsenal are in an equation with them. Arsenal are on a level with them that last season got us just 2 points off them, was one win away from that title. That's the difference, was one win last season between lifting the title, of course, and sadly not. And if you're any other fan of any other club, you do not want Mikel Arteta at Arsenal. Period. You just don't. Because you know deep down that if Arsenal are going to return and establish themselves not only as just title challengers, as they already have done, but establish themselves as serial trophy winners, you know that there probably is not another coach on this planet right now that is going to be available in the next few windows, in the next few years, that is going to take Arsenal to that. That's just the reality. Ancelotti, I think, will retire, having completed his next role with Real Madrid. And then you're looking around and going, who? Who is that person that's going to take Arsenal to that next step that Arteta isn't doing already? And the answer is, I haven't got a clue. I really don't think that there is somebody out there right now that is going to do that to Arsenal in this current state of play. And if you're a rival fan, you do not want him going anywhere. Sorry, if you're a rival fan, you want him going somewhere. You don't want him at Arsenal. And that's where you know that Arsenal have made the right choice, because everybody can see that. We, as I say, are going to open up the phone lines in a quick, hot second. But the only thing hotter, perhaps, than the news that drops yesterday is the fantastic, burning bright safety and security that NordVPN can, of course, bring you and your loved ones, as always, while they're surfing the net on their phone, their tablet, or indeed their laptop as well. And I'm looking forward, of course, to hearing that while I'm away in Ireland, that using that VPN service is going to be very beneficial to me indeed, as I'm sure it will be to you and yours as you travel on holiday and around the world. Of course, it can bring you that safety and security that you want, adds that added layer of protection that is an absolute necessity. That's the word I'm looking for, an absolute necessity in this day and age. And I'm looking forward to hearing more stories from you guys that have been using the service and have been enjoying it very much so. And thank you to Nord once again for supporting the channel. If you go to nordvpn.com/Gooner, you can get yourself a link off that 2-year plan and 4 months extra thrown in free as well. Link is in the description as always. And Football Prizes continue to support us as well. All football-related memorabilia to win, put on your mantelpieces to show off to your friends. Arsenal-related prizes, as always, are available over there. Just head over to the competitions page as well. It is, as always, a pleasure to see them associated with us, and I look forward to hearing more winners. We've had so many so far as well, and that indeed is great. Right, let's move to part 2 and your questions and your calls, hopefully, right after this. I have just dropped the link if you would like to come have your say on the Mikel Arteta situation. And of course, as always, you need to have a webcam and to be over the age of 18. I can see already we've got 1 or 2 trolls in the chat box. I'm assuming that they probably won't show up. But if you'd like to have your say, of course, now is the time to click that link down in the chat box. I'm also going to put it at the top of today's video description for the time that we are live. It won't be there, of course, after the show is finished. But if you'd like to hop on to have your say on Mikel Arteta's contract signature, now is the time to do that. Otherwise, we're going to go through your comments, of course, as always, and get some of your feelings. RRDM says the internet rewards any trending news, true or not. Some people selfishly toe this path for content and likes, especially expecting more as social media space continues to grow. This is a well-earned contract, says RRDM. Gary says his win ratio is better than any Arsenal manager, considering he had an awful team for 2 years as well. That's amazing. Plain and simple. Cyrus says, I'm actually very happy that Arteta got this extension because he's earned it and he has leapfrogged Arsenal past our rivals. I can see already a couple of people jumping in. So it seems if you want to get on, you're going to have to be quick. Dom is up first. Let's chat to Dom. Dom, how you doing, my friend? You good, you well?
I'm really well, Tom. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I just think, everyone, I don't know how long people have been following the team, but certainly when Wenger left, I was really worried that we would just spiral into a succession of managers who, would just turn over and turn over and turn over, and to have found seemingly a legacy manager in Arteta is incredible, and it just makes for a great period to be a Gunner.
It does. Where do you think the apathy from some fans come from? Because obviously we see it. I've seen it in the chat box this morning. Like, why do you think some people aren't happy about this?
I genuinely think some people maybe haven't been supporting the club for that long, or that they haven't seen the kind of, that maybe they haven't been through periods of supporting. I mean, it just seems really unreasonable to think that, Arteta has done a bad job. It just seems absurd to me. So yeah, I it's hard to kind of contemplate why they feel that way, but I think you always want to entertain those conversations and say, well, tell me why. Why do you think he's doing such a bad job? When actually, if you look at all the information out there, it's just gotten better and better.
And it has. I mean, year on year, Arsenal have acquired more points. They've scored more goals. They've broken more records. It's just that trophy element, isn't it? The trophy element is the thing that is at the moment lacking.
100%.
How long do you think that can go on for?
Well, I think you're right to suggest that, it may be a question of his next contract that if he can't bring some sort of trophy success to the club, that
Mm.
there's a genuine question there whether or not he's merited it. But it's very difficult to imagine this squad, this team, and its momentum not bagging some trophies in the foreseeable future of this next contract. So I think that's where the expectation is. Huge pressure, but I also kind of love the fact that Arteta presents himself in a manner which is no one's putting more pressure than he is on himself, and I kind of I'm on board. I can't wait.
Yeah, I think and just lastly before I move on, I think what's the most kind of key element has been this change of rhetoric and the fan view of Arsenal and the connection with obviously not only just Arteta, but the ownership has obviously changed. We used to have, protests outside the stadium, you spend, we spend, net spend, as I quote my good friend Mo about that as well. It was always going to be a period of change that was going to take time. Do you think that maybe the length of time that it's taken to fully turn Arsenal around has been maybe in a reason too long for some people that aren't willing to wait that time?
Yeah, wow. I mean, it too long. It feels. I think it's been rapid. I think the ascension of the team has been incredibly fast. I think it's been faster than we've would have anticipated. And so yeah, too slow. Gosh, maybe some people need to get a reality check because we've really climbed up very fast, and we're all hoping that we can start to enjoy the fruits of what's been some incredible labour by everyone at the club.
Mm.
I do. I said all the coaching staff. I mean, you know, we're no longer a laughing stock, which had been something we had to. I used to introduce myself to friends and say I'm a long-suffering Arsenal fan.
Yeah, and I did the same, and I remember it, and I feel like maybe obviously, new fans come through every single year, and there are a lot of young supporters that won't remember. I mean, I was talking about the FA Cup win in 2014,
Mm.
and that being kind of the end of that awful run that we'd not won a trophy, of course, for so long. And I remember watching it at university, and I remember talking to some fans the other day about it, and they were like, "Yeah, I was like 6 when that," and I'm like, "Shut up!" Like it is, and obviously, like these are kids of friends of mine, and I was just like, "This is just." Yeah, so irritating, but like you can't grasp how long we were in pain for to be back where we are, and now there's an element I maybe think of taking it for granted somewhat.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. I don't have anything else to add, Tom, other than I can't wait for the derby on the weekend, and go the Gunners. Thanks for having me.
Dom, absolute pleasure, my friend, and thank you for being our first caller. I really appreciate it.
Cheers.
Thank you, mate. Fantastic stuff. Big love to Dom. Make sure you're giving him plenty of love in the chat box, people. Up next is Bobby's up next. Then we've got Rob after Bobby as well. Bobby, how you doing, my friend? You good, you well?
Very well, Tom, and yourself?
Yeah, very good, thank you. I got the morning coffee, I see.
That's it, yeah. A great tip for you, Tom, is the coconut milk flat white. So if you're ever
Okay.
going into Starbucks, for any of them or viewers, I'd recommend a coconut milk flat white on a
Well, there
separate
you
note.
go. Well, I
But
appreciate other coffee houses are available, of
yeah,
course.
absolutely, absolutely.
But no, I appreciate that. There's no advertising here in terms of specifics, so you're fine. Tell me where your head's at with Mikel Arteta's contract, mate.
Is the only place it can be happy. I don't see how you could have any other alternative. So you pressed on it a while back in terms of what are the alternatives. If there was somebody out there that could deliver you, guarantee you success in terms of guaranteeing you the league or the Champions League, that's not out there. If you look at how long it took Pep to win the league, it was a not the league, sorry, the Champions League. It was very hard, right? It is not a proven fact, and that's Guardiola with all the money he spent. And you could say, oh, Ancelotti raises the bar. He might very well do. He might have some more pulling power. But the point is, again, what's his appetite after Real Madrid? Is he going to want to be at his age? And I don't mean that in any disrespectful way, but I mean, at his age, does he really want to start a new journey again where he's going to be building again? I don't think it works. I think you see what happens to clubs that change managers during a cycle when it doesn't make sense. So then they're in between the players, and we had it with certain players being in that weren't part of the manager's vision. So regardless how great you are, you might just not be part of the manager's vision. And with us being scrutinised a lot more financially in every club now, you can't go through that churn of players just because your manager's changed. So Chelsea will do it again if Maresca doesn't work. And where does that leave them? And I fear that if we didn't take this step, if people say, "I'll give him to the end of the season," what, to run down his contract? And what happens if Ancelotti's left at that point and there's a gaping hole in Madrid or several other clubs? He'd be a very prized asset. So if you asked Chelsea, would they have taken Arteta now? Of course they would. I think if Arteta was available for Liverpool, he might have been a desirable option as well. So you've got to look at those things. Would he be a desirable option elsewhere to our competitors? Would he make them better? Would he provide a continuity? Of course he would. So I'm happy with that context, and I know we got cut off on transfer day, and I think realistically, if you look at you can't expect to fix everything within a window or two. And I understand everyone's been very dramatic over Odegaard being injured, Rice is in red card, and obviously Marino's. But the point is, you're going to get points in a season where you're going to be injury stricken, no matter how much money you've spent. And we've seen it with City. So we've got to understand that this is a good testing point a lot earlier in the season. We're going to have to show this at some point. If we can show that we've got players that can come through, we can try other options. It's better to show more versatility now than the last 3 games of the season. If you've done it earlier within the season, and I think it's a good experience for Arteta. And yeah, I'm very confident. And I think for me personally, there isn't a better option on board. And I think he has united the fan base. There's always going to be a certain percentage of the fan base that aren't going to like whoever we had. If we had Ancelotti, maybe me and yourself would be saying we don't agree with why he brought him in because he was at the end of his career. Probably didn't have his appetite. So you're never going to please everyone. But if you're pleasing the majority of people, even if you've just got the right intentions, you don't have to please the majority of people. Even if you've just got the right intentions.
There's plenty of things that have happened because the majority have voted for it. That haven't always been good, to be fair, Bobby.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But I know where you're coming from, and I think that what the perception overall, I think is wildly positive. You often hear, especially from a negative side of things, negativity does tend to be louder. It tends to stand out more. It tends to come from certain places. Not always, of course. And I think there are people that have put in fair arguments, of course, against the idea of Arteta signing a new deal. But I think overall, you're right.
What would that be, though? Why would they say?
I think the arguments at the moment are that he's not landed a trophy since 2020, like a major trophy. The other one would be some people would argue that we've not done enough in the transfer market, although I don't necessarily point the finger at Arteta for that, because I think if he could sign players, he would. And clearly they've gone down a different pathway, and obviously the market in itself was an issue. And I think there are moments in games that they would point to, like Aston Villa at the end of last season, or some tactical decisions that he has made that maybe have cost us. But, he's not perfect, and neither is any manager on the planet. So mistakes are always going to happen at this stage, and especially at an early stage of his career. But I think ultimately, despite those factors, the benefits and the positives from what has happened under Arteta just far outweigh those drawbacks that could be highlighted.
I think one of the things we've got here, Tom, is when we had Wenger, I think everybody, including myself, wanted a striker that one season when we were chasing Leicester. Really wanted a striker that window, didn't we? And we didn't get it. And I think everybody says the same now, but the problem is, I've heard you say this as well. When you look at raising the bar, who raises the bar on Havertz that was available this window? You're taking a chance on Osimhen. So when you look into it in depth, has he made the right choice there by sticking with what we've got? Because I think Havertz wasn't a £10 million signing as a makeshift. He was somebody that was a lot of money, and he's done well. So the idea that we could improve on that, I don't know if it's available. And we can look at City with Haaland. There's not another Haaland in the world. So when you look at a transfer strategy, are you going to be able to buy him from City? No. Are you going to be able to? Could we have been in the market for Mbappe? Then what's the tier below that? Havertz is at the top of that, wouldn't you say? Like, in terms of,
I personally, as I agree with you, and I said it, I think you referenced it. I don't think there was a centre forward on the market in the summer that was an obvious candidate to overtake Havertz in that position. The only one that would have been a big gamble at £84 million would have been Gyökeres, who's had a really good start this season. And after 2 seasons in Portugal, it may be that he presents as a profile too good to turn up. But for me, Gyökeres was the only player in terms of a striker that maybe Arsenal would have done, would have got better than what we already have. But to spend £84 million on that player to commit, because the striker is such an important factor. That's why Man City, Aguero was maturing and getting beyond his prime. They kept hold of him. They had Jesus coming through as well, of course. But it wasn't until Erling Haaland was available that Pep Guardiola went out and signed his centre forward. It took how many years before he got his? Because, of course, Aguero was already there when he took over. But how long did it take before he, kept hold of an Aguero, of course, that wasn't, always fit because of the injuries that he had. He brought Gabriel Jesus in as a younger player to come through. Alvarez, of course, I think came in 6 months before Haaland as another young player. But it wasn't until Haaland became available that Pep was like, he's the one, we're going to go for it. And I just think that if Arsenal are going to try and catch Haaland, they have to wait until they are, like City were, 100% sure that the striker that they go for is going to be the striker that transforms that position. Because if we get it wrong, it's not a simple case of, we'll just go and spend another 80 million next summer on the next guy that it could be.
Absolutely.
Final thoughts, Bobby, just before I move on.
I think final thoughts would be, I think that's the only criticism people give him, is that what he's done in the transfer window. And you just touched on it there, and I don't want to take up too much time, but Guardiola's last press interview when he lost Aguero was, you can't replace him. You can't replace him. So if that was his perception, no, he was wrong, evidently. But at that point, he assumed he couldn't replace that kind of player, that profile player. But he did it. But I think my final thoughts are, everybody who's a bit negative or nervous about this weekend, don't be. At the end of the day, we're going to have to go through this point at some point. We're going to have to go into certain games without key players missing. There's never going to be a squad full enough to deal with the inevitable freak injuries. So let's see what Arteta does. I'm confident. I think we should all be.
Absolutely. Bobby, thank you. Bobby's taken himself off camera. I mean, it was perfectly timed, to be fair. I completely finished this point, and that was it. So we got to hear, Bobby, what you were saying, if you can still hear me down below. But thank you, Bobby, for your time. You got everything, I think, what you wanted to say out, despite cutting off at the end there. But thank you for that. Some really good points there. Let's get in Rob into the chat. As always, a regular in these phone-in shows. How you doing, Rob? You good? You well?
Kia ora. Yeah, not too bad, Tom. I've got to say, it's lovely to be doing this at 7:30 in the evening rather than.
I know, it's a good time for yourself, isn't it? Yeah. I sense that you're not entirely aligned with me, so I'm curious as to see what your thoughts are.
I mean, I am and I'm not. I guess I'm sort of pushing the boundary a little bit of disagreeing with you, but I guess I would take issue with if he doesn't win a trophy in the next 3 years within his contract, then questions should be asked.
So you're actually further along the spectrum than maybe I am towards Arteta in some ways.
Well, from my perspective, I believe if we go in the next 3 seasons, if we're challenging, if we get to the semis or maybe the finals of the Champions League, but don't win it. If we get to the semis of the FA Cup, but we don't win it. And if we're still second and, pushing probably Man City, but, could be Liverpool or maybe, an outlying like a Leicester. I very much doubt that, because I think we would win against those sorts of teams.
Yeah.
But if we came second in the Prem but are still pushing, I would still say that he should get another contract.
Right.
And the reason is, and this is maybe a question back to you and maybe the viewers, I believe that Arteta has improved the team year on year and individual players. I would say probably only Martinelli. I can't think of really another one in our team where you could say that there's been a drop off. You know, you look at Saliba, you look at the Gabbies, you look at
Xhaka when he was here.
Yeah, Havertz is the main one for me when you look at what he was like. Yeah, exactly. But when you look at what he was like at Chelsea and how, you know, everyone wrote him off, but Arteta has definitely improved him, you know.
Gabriel.
I think the quality of the coaching, first of all, maybe other than Guardiola, is there someone else better? Even around the world, I'm not convinced. I don't think Ancelotti is a better coach than Arteta. I think
Ancelotti. I think you've got a point when it comes to individual player improvement. The thing about Ancelotti is that he takes players that are already brilliant and extracts the best from them. And takes those big marquee players to the biggest of trophies. That's why I think when he went to Everton and he didn't have those players there, that it fell apart. You know, and he even tried to bring the likes of James Rodriguez in, you know, and stuff like that to change that. But even then, it didn't work. But when he's at those clubs that have got established players, so I think people would argue with the Ancelotti side of things is that if that's what he's good at, Arsenal have grown to that level under Arteta. So is Ancelotti then the guy that takes Arsenal from where Arteta's taken them to that next step?
Yes, but you would argue it was only the last transfer, you know, this recent transfer window, maybe the one before, but certainly this one where the best players from around the world would look at Arsenal and go, that's a club that I want to go to. I mean, when Arteta took over, there's no way we're getting the best players in the world. They would look at Arsenal and go, I'm not going anywhere near that. They're finishing 5th or 8th or you know, lower. And they're not pushing for you know, titles or trophies. So that's one thing. Second thing, so this is the question to the viewers and to you. I can't think of another. To be fair, I don't follow that many other sports as you know, avidly as I do football, but I can't think of another sport where so much emphasis is put on the coach. To me, the reason that we didn't win last year was because Man City is just, you know, a juggernaut and the players didn't quite deliver in front of goal. And the year before, you could argue maybe Arteta could be to blame for the drop off towards the end of the season, but I think most Arsenal supporters would agree it was massively to do with Saliba and also the fact that you know, we hadn't hit our stride in the first half of the season. I don't know, but you know, to me, I don't see that Arteta. I say Arteta is the difference in a positive way, not in a negative way. I think if we don't win in the next 3 years on the basis of what we've seen before in the last 2 seasons, it would be more down to the players than it would be down to Arteta. Well, and I think
it maybe would be more down to our opponent in some degree. Yes. If we somehow are better than we have been and we're still not winning it, the team that beats us would have to be absolutely near faultless, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, there's obviously 115 reasons why.
Well, there's
and to be fair, Guardiola is, you know, not even a generational coach. He's a multi-generational coach. Yeah. He's like one of a kind. And then just lastly, so you can get other people on. I think the reason you asked the question, and maybe the first person, I think, you know, why do fans? Why are they coming? And, you know, why is there sort of this negativity? I mean, you called it apathy, but I call it negativity towards Arteta. I think a massive part of it is, I think there's 2 reasons. One is kind of social media, this sort of instant gratification, this idea that, you know, you're scrolling and you're looking at Instagram and you're looking at all these kind of perfect people with perfect lives. And there's this kind of, I think amongst, I guess I'm going to be dissing some fans here, but I think there's this kind of presumptive nature that we somehow, should be guaranteed this. We're against Man City, 115, and Pep Guardiola. There's no guarantee. And I think that's the second reason is we look at them with envy and we think, well, look, they've done it 5 out of 6. Why shouldn't we be able to do that? But it's like, I don't know, you've got a coach that's just a genius and you've got another 115 reasons as well. Like there's no guarantee. So I don't know, for me, the concept in 3 years that if we were doing all those things that I said at the beginning, challenging, getting to semis, the concept of going, okay, we're going to get rid of Arteta, it would be crazy. It'd be like ripping it up and starting again. And we're into another 5-year cycle, and I think just lastly, I think that he should be massively praised for the culture change. Like when that first interview that he had where he talked about getting the fans on board, changing the mindset and the culture of the club, both behind the scenes and on the pitch. He's delivered all of those things, like where we were at before he came in versus where we're at now in regards to, okay, there's outliers, but the majority of the fans, really loving watching the team play. It's great football to watch in general. And, I haven't been to the Emirates, unfortunately, but, my understanding is that there's, an amazing atmosphere there rather than, maybe it was a bit dead or, people weren't on board.
The atmosphere, I cannot explain. Like to people that aren't able to go to the Emirates for a variety of reasons, I cannot tell you from the perspective of someone who was there at the start of the season I suppose from when I started work compared to when I was, going as a fan several years ago. I remember going to games, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. First game was in 2013, so 11 years ago now. I can't tell you the difference in the Emirates Stadium atmosphere, over the course. And I've been to basically every single home game for the last 2 seasons, which I'm in a very privileged position to be able to do. But you see the change. Like you see, even in that 2-year period, as opposed to an 11-year period, like the massive rise in the noise, the fan experience, the togetherness, the unity, the lack of infighting that there was in back in the day. And I know a part of that I think is post-pandemic, just the relief of getting back into the ground to a degree in 2022 as well, in 2021. But there is obviously what happens on the pitch. And I think that ultimately what happens on the pitch is always going to dictate things. We're winning. I had someone leave a comment to me yesterday saying, aren't you sick of losing? And I'm like, we've lost 1 game in the league this year. Like, that's the thing that baffles me the most. And I get what they're talking about in the broad context is missing out on trophies, but it's this entitlement that I really struggle with. The expectation that it's trophy. There is more to football to me than that. There isn't for some people, and that's fine. If to you if it's trophies or nothing, that's the way you watch football. That's the way you appreciate football. I don't look at it in that sense. I want them. We should aim for them as an absolute minimum. But I love being an Arsenal fan right now. I enjoy being an Arsenal fan right now, and that's what's different. Rob, final quick short thing before I let you go.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Ultimately, I agree with what your kind of premise of, we should look at it in 3 years if he hasn't won a trophy, but he's brought us so far. I think if we were, just reiterating what I've said, and that point of the vibe and what it's like watching. I mean, would we rather be a Mourinho team of defending? I don't know. His football wasn't boring, but like it wasn't the kind of enjoyment. And ultimately, would you want to go to 38 matches or 37 matches and watch that sort of football and win trophies versus, the sorts of attacking, free-flowing, enjoyable football that we do? And just, maybe just if you could ask the viewers, and again to you to answer that question, is there another sport where if a team was regularly getting to finals or pushing, coming second regularly, would they sack their managers because, they're not winning trophies, even if they were, you know,
progressing and moving forwards and getting closer to that.
I can't think of one, but I don't know enough. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe there are examples that people can come up with, but that is yeah, you know, that I think is that for me, it's just like I don't understand how you couldn't be happy with the way things are going when all we're doing is getting better and going forwards and getting closer to that ultimate goal. And it's like, no, I want to jack it in now, and I'm ready to move on. Yeah, that's what I struggle with. But Rob, thank you so much for your time, mate. And just before you go, how are things? Are good things? Always important to an update from you.
Somehow the Mudita, my dog, is
still
hanging on. I mean, I don't know how on earth she's managing it. It's quite a stressful time, but we're getting through it day by day, hour by hour. Yeah.
Thank you, mate. I really appreciate the update, and you know, all the well wishes as always sent to you and yours.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Have a good rest of your evening, of course, as it is over there, and a much simpler time, of course, for those in Australia and New Zealand, of course, as well, to tune into these shows. It's those, of course, across the pond, the other directions, such as this man. It's much earlier in the morning. Elliot, how you doing, mate? You good? You well?
Yes, I'm well, Tom. It is here 3:44 in the morning, and as you know, I'm a bit of a night owl myself, so this is you know, par for the course. Again, be like water, as I always say. And yeah, it's again great news to hear that Arteta is indeed signed down to a new contract, and one of our fears have been allayed.
So yeah, obviously I'm conscious of time, so the next few calls are going to be shorter than the ones we've had already. So apologies in advance for that. But there is, me and you often don't always align on where we're at with these views, but it seems that you think that this is the right decision that Arsenal have made. So I guess, what do you agree with me? Because Rob didn't a second ago. So do you agree with me that these next 3 years have to deliver a Premier League title or a Champions League title, and if they don't, then decisions that are quite difficult could have to be made?
Yes, I'm in lockstep with you on that issue. Yes, he needs to bring titles. He needs to bring a Champions League. He needs to bring a Premier League to the Arsenal Football Club, because I mean, he's being paid as such. This is one of the he's being paid as one of the top managers in the world, and in fact, he is one of the top managers in the world. He's one of the top 5 managers in the world if you take into account Pep, if you take into account Ancelotti, if you take into account Xabi Alonso. If Arteta hits the open market, all big sides are in for him. Let's call a spade a spade. He is not coming back, and they're offering big money. They offer him whatever he wants, carte blanche, and they want to bring in a man like MIKEL Arteta because of the job he's done at such a huge club like Arsenal Football Club. So yes, he warrants the money. But again, getting back to your question, yes, we need to see titles. We need to see trophies. Improvement is done. But not only that, but we need to see big signings. I think the winger signing he covets. I think the striker signing he covets. Those big signings need to be brought in too. I think he held fire on Gyökeres because he wanted to see another season of success, which he may have. And I think his top target is Isak and the likes of Nico Williams. So, but again, I think he's got a side big enough and strong enough to challenge on all fronts, and we need to see that improvement. We need to see him take that next step. If he takes that next step, I think he's one of the top 3 managers in the world, quite simply. And the next to Ancelotti and Pep.
Yeah, if he wins the league, it's difficult to argue against. I mean, even without at the moment, I think the point that you raised about if he was to go, there would not be a shortage of elite level clubs that will be looking at MIKEL Arteta as becoming potentially their next head coach, because that's the bracket that he's put himself into with what he's done to this Arsenal Football Club in such a short period of time. What are your expectations in terms of this particular season with him then? Like, because some people say a trophy is an absolute minimum. Others are, more understanding of, who you're up against in terms of Man City and Pep's final season. So where are you at with that?
Well, listen, he's being paid as a big manager. He's being paid as one of the top managers in the world. Yes, we need to see trophies now. It's been 5 years. The drought is the drought is evident for all to see. And that's what any rival fan is knocking us against, is that we don't win. We haven't won trophies recently, even with such a great manager. He needs to take that that next step. He needs to bring in a Carabao Cup. He needs to bring in an FA Cup. He needs to bring in either a Premier League or Champions League trophy. Yes. I mean, the margins at the top are thin, but he needs to find those margins and beat them, quite simply. And I think nothing less can be said. I mean, we are very lucky to have a man like MIKEL Arteta at the helm. Let's say that. To those who come back and say, "Oh, we can find a new manager who is as good as him," and they have no retort. Usually, they have no retort to that question. They say, "Who else can do as good a job as MIKEL Arteta?" And the sounds are silent.
I had a great one the other a few months back. I think someone was like, "Oh, Inzaghi's won the league of Inter Milan, bring Inzaghi." And I was like, "Oh yeah, you want Inzaghi? Because could you tell me what system he plays?" And he was like, well, plays with this system, and it was like completely the opposite. It's like, okay, so you've not watched anything about Inzaghi, but because he's won the league of Inter, he must be the right choice. And it's funny when I have those kind of discussions, because then it just becomes so blatantly obvious that there is a priority just to get rid of the manager rather than actually thinking about the solutions that are there that are going to work with Arsenal. And someone suggested, I think in the chat box earlier on, Michel, who's the Girona coach, of course, who got them into the Champions League last season. I mean, tell me what trophies he's won that justify obviously him then taking this forward from where Arteta's at. It's all very hypocritical and backwards and contradictory, but that usually is the way, Elliot, when it comes to that. I'm going to move on only because I'm conscious of time, but thank you so much for jumping on, mate. I really do appreciate it.
Cheers, mate. I'll go back to sleep now.
Yeah, please do. Thank you, mate. Lovely stuff. Let's get TJR on next. How you doing, mate? You good? You well?
Yeah, I'm all right, mate. It's civilized time here. I'm not drinking. I'm of my own volition, so hopefully a little bit sharp.
Good stuff, man. I know you've got plenty to say, as you always do in my comment. But for the record, I do always read your comments that you leave, the essays that you leave for me. I don't always get around to replying to them, but I do read them, just so you know.
No, it's all good. Some are rants, some are, most of it's a rant. Inzaghi plays a 3-5-2. If you want that,
there you go. Knowledge.
That wasn't me that was ranting to you about Inzaghi. But
I know it wasn't.
I saw them play at Atlanta, and they absolutely smacked them 4-0 recently, or a few weeks ago.
We're playing them this season, so
we'll see how it goes. So that was my Italian.
It'd be awful if we absolutely tanked them, wouldn't it, in the San Siro? That would really kind of embarrass the Inzaghi claims a bit, wouldn't it?
I think it's more that if we get not pumped by Atlanta, but if both the Italian teams are going to be a style clash for us, because it's a very different sort of style of defending and a lot of falling on the ground, and that could frustrate not just fans, but I think players as well. And I think Calafiori would be. I think the goal in theory is that Calafiori is ready for those games, and maybe Man City, it'll be as it comes sort of approach.
Let's
I can't remember what else I was talking about.
Yeah, tell me what your thoughts are. Just because I'm really conscious of time and I want to get as many people on. So just give me your monologue on the contract.
Sure. So Arteta, there's a lot of things. I think he manages up really well. I think I've spoken to you about this before, where it's expectations versus reality, and the obvious thing is that is if there's improvement, there's no reason to stop that improvement, and if there's a better option out there, cool, we'll listen to it. But at the moment, Xabi Alonso's realistically the only coach that is on that sort of timeline and path. And Arteta's deal it's solid. It's fine. Edu, you can sort of argue otherwise, but that's maybe a personal thing. And it's about squad building in conjunction with lots of other factors that we as fans don't get any insight into. KSE, being an expert, this isn't a rant on basketball, but they recently overpaid, in my opinion, one of their key players. But they've got Nikola Jokic, who's probably maybe the best or top 3 player in the world, and they needed someone to get next to him. And Rob was talking about how coaching is different in every sport. In the NBA, there's 5 players, so you pay for past performance, you pay for all that stuff, and football is kind of the same, but with managers. So you're paying for past performance and future performance, which is entirely what we've done and entirely rational. he gets a bit David Brenty in the pickpockets and that sort of stuff.
Everyone's got a bit of Brent in them, to be fair.
Yeah, and it's also media performance stuff, which is something I think the more that I've paid attention to it, the more the English media I've found are really focused on that, especially with the England national team, but that's a whole different thing. As for who we should have brought in, I don't think Rabiot is going to happen. I think that's a pipe dream and would probably
I'd be very surprised.
Wouldn't go well at all, I think, in terms of chemistry, which is something that Arteta values, obviously. I would have liked a utility player to sort of swap maybe Kivior out or Zinchenko out, but there were no real offers. So that's I think I've said to you in one of the comments I would have liked Kadioglu, who's gone to Brighton, but he's a guy that can play everywhere, but sort of hasn't proven it at the level, which is another non-Arteta sort of concept. What do you want to know?
No, I think you summed it up well, mate. I think that, the Edu point is an interesting one. I think that, doubts around Edu, obviously, I think have kind of re-emerged more because of the summer we've just had, because of the difficulties of it. When you take a step back and you look at the bigger picture of what Edu has done, not just, of course, in the transfer window, but I'm talking about Saka's contract, Saliba's contract, Gabriel's contract, Ødegaard, Ben White, Arteta obviously himself has to be negotiated as well. Like the contract sides, keeping Ethan Nwaneri and Miles Lewis-Skelly at the club involved in those discussions. Your losses look far bigger than your wins because you get measured on those, I think, more and are referenced more. But when you do look at the bigger picture, ultimately, the job that Arteta and Edu have done to take Arsenal from where they were when they came into where they are now and where we continue to go. It's not a case of like Arsenal going, backwards from last season. No. It's a case of Arsenal every single year have had more points, have scored more goals, have broke more records, have got closer to Man City. And so, of course, he's signed a new contract. Because if you're doing all those, imagine if you're in your job and every single year you're getting better, you're bringing the company more money, you're achieving more of your objectives, you're doing better each year. Are the company going to return out? Yeah, no, we're going to replace you. Like you're thinking, what on earth are you doing? So yeah,
it's also a case they're very American in their concept of wage structure and improvement, or where it might be PR, it might be whatever, but they announce it when it's convenient. Who knows how long these negotiations have really been going on for? Chances are it would have been, hey, Arteta, tell us what you want and we'll have a chat and our lawyers will get back to you. We'll talk to your agent.
I don't think it would have been a tough discussion.
Yeah, exactly.
TJ,
no one's pounding it out.
I'm only moving on because of time.
No
appreciate
problem.
your input and your patience as well.
So all good. Have a good one.
You too, mate. Enjoy. I'll speak to you soon, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Lovely stuff. Simon's up next. Simon, how you doing? You good, Joel?
Not too bad. And yourself, Tom?
Yes. Have we calmed down from deadline day?
It was very out of character of me to kind of be like that. I think that transfer deadline.
I think it showed you what you really
kind
thought,
of, Yeah, it kind of played on me a little bit. I'm usually a lot more positive than that.
Well, you came on before the Sterling deal happened. So obviously we got that deal done in the end. And did that make you feel any better?
It did. It did make me feel better. Having somebody coming into the attacking pod, I think Sterling with his experience, I think the squad's was a bit thin with experience. And although we've lost bodies, we got a bit more experience. We're a little bit more happier as a group, I think, going forward. I think the boys that left were probably not the happiest around the place last season and would have been similar, if not worse, this season, based on the game time they had last year. In terms of the bodies we lost, the amount of minutes played last season by those that went, it's not too concerning considering how many we got. So I know there's some rhetoric around we're weak in terms of players, but the boys that went didn't have many minutes anyway. So I don't think we're too bad. And I'm just definitely in a much better mind frame, especially after the news yesterday.
So you're happy about this then?
Yes, Tom, I kind of agree with you in terms of, he fully deserved it. Moving forward, I think, he has to win trophies. He himself, from the very front, is leading with the pushing of the high standards of Arsenal Football Club, which is one of the most absolutely unbelievable traits in a manager that I like, and in Arteta that I like. I love his passion and his enthusiasm to push the standards, to push the boundaries. Very Pep Guardiola-like, very winner-like. And I don't think there's many people on this planet that will say honestly that he isn't on course for a title or for a trophy. I think you take the analogy, shooting for the moon and land amongst the stars. We've definitely left the projects and the slums of 8th place, and we're definitely among the stars right now. Whether we land on the moon, let's see.
Yeah, I think it's summed up really well. And it is a case of that he's earned the right to say, let's see, because all we're doing, as I've mentioned before on the show, is that we're moving forwards. We're moving closer to that goal. We're getting closer to trophies, closer. You know, we reached the quarterfinals of the Champions League for the first time in 14 years last season. I think that takes people are like, oh, well, it was a quarterfinal. You know, it only matters if you win. The next place after winner is loser. And I know some people think of it that way, but it's a very binary way of looking at football, and I'm just not in that mindset.
100%. Some people are just so unrealistic. Only one team can win this. This means every season, Man City or Real Madrid are not going to win the Champions League. Now, look, that might be the fact with us. We might not get there. We might not get over the line like last season, but it's about being competitive. And Arteta deserves another contract if he remains as competitive as he's been the last 2 seasons.
The Champions League point is massive as well, because you talk about Man City or Real Madrid, only one of them can't win it. Man City have won it once in this entire billion plus whatever expenditure, managers galore, 6 of the last 7 Premier League titles. They've lifted the Champions League, once. And that gives you the context of it.
Yeah, in terms of football as a whole, there's almost 99% failure of not winning the trophy because only one team can win it. So it's only that very small percentage. If you look at it from a real macro point of view, then that's the case. But in terms of where he's positioned us, there's still, going back to my analogy, there's still lots of fuel left in the rocket to get us there. And we're doing really well in terms of the aura that he possesses, the pull that you listen to interviews now, I want to come and play for Mikel Arteta. The players are attracted to Arsenal. I think the big signings will come. I think we will start shopping at the very top table of transfers soon. And I think that's why we didn't get some of our star players this year, because we're shopping at that top table. He's holding the standard of purchase at a very high point, not settling for second best in terms of permanent investment. And then also I think that moving forward we will start to see the Isaacs of the world or the very best players of other teams being taken by Arsenal.
Absolutely. Simon, thank you so much for speaking so eloquently and for your time as well. It's very much appreciated.
Appreciate your time. Have a nice day, mate.
You too, man. We've got just over 5 minutes left. I've got 3 people waiting. I'm going to try and get through all of them. LJ is going to be up next, who is en route somewhere, it seems. LJ, how you doing? You good? You well?
Hey, Tom, not too bad. Just finished the school run. Apologies.
That's all right, man. No problem at all. I thought I'd give you time to sort that out before I jumped you in. Tell me what you're at. I can see your tagline there is neither excited nor disappointed. So round it up for me.
Yeah, that's precisely where I am. Look, ultimately, we need to have a manager in charge of the squad and assessing what is out there in the marketplace. Arteta is probably the best man to lead the squad as it is now. So I can totally respect that. However, the way I see it is, in his announcement yesterday, he sort of made mention of Stan and Josh in particular and how hungry they are for success and obviously achieving the honours. And so for me, as a supporter, I see that as, okay, the summer that the club has just had, they have deemed what they have brought in as well as the exits as enough in order for them to achieve that goal of winning trophies and winning the majors.
Based on what was on the market, yes.
As he pointed out in his in some of the transcripts from yesterday. So from my perspective, that means everyone at the club is fully aware that with your goal being achieving the majors and the major honours, what we have done is enough. So for this season, there should be no excuse for us to be able to obtain that goal. Yes, there'll be obstacles in the way in terms of other teams who are obviously performing at a good level, aka Man City, Liverpool, and then some of the other competitions. But what they have done, they have deemed it enough in order for us to challenge, in their words, for the major honours.
Yes.
The second thing, the way I see it is, in the corporate space, anytime we have a performance review, I've carried out a number of performance reviews, and I've obviously been part of them myself, and I've been looking to obtain promotions. There's a number of different metrics we look at. We call them KPIs. So obviously you've got your major KPIs, which we'll call the Premier League. But in order for you to obtain the next level in your career or obtain that promotion, they look at your performance from a more holistic view. So
Yes, of
it's
course.
not just me hitting my sales targets as a sales manager, and it's not just my team hitting their sales target, but what else are we doing around that in terms of social cohesion with the rest of the company? What am I bringing to the team, and some of the other incentives and initiatives that I'll be involved in? In my case, the way I see that with Arteta is your main goal is the Premier League, granted. But what are you doing in the other cups? What are you doing in the FA Cups, the slightly more minor cups? What are you doing in the Champions League? And so far, since he took over in December 2019, aside from the FA Cup run, in that very same season when he joined, I haven't seen enough to make me think, if I was doing his performance review, that aside from hitting his number one KPI, which is trying to win the league, and finish second is respectable, the other things around it doesn't lend me to support him being able to. So if I was doing that review, I couldn't then go to my board and say, yeah, he deserves a pay rise because he's doing well in one KPI, but in the rest of them, well, he's not doing very well at all.
I think
where
LJ,
we expected.
Just to come into this point here, I think the mistake that you're making is that you're trying to template something from a different space onto a completely other space that isn't aligned in that sense. I get the theory,
Fair enough.
and I absolutely understand the KPI argument of that. But the reality is that for a salesperson who's used it, you know, they'll have a contract with the company, but they'll be employed at the company on a full-time basis. Whereas football managers have year-length contracts in the case of Arteta that was expiring at the end of this season. So if they're doing a performance review of what he's doing, you said his number one target in the Premier League is to put Arsenal in a position where they're competing and challenging to win that Premier League title. Not to win it, because to win it, of course, would mean that Arsenal would have to be realistically overachieving in comparison to the number one rival that they have, which is Manchester City, who everybody expects to win. That's the job, is to try and beat them to it. But if the expectation in a season is to do that, then you're effectively asking him to overachieve what is realistically possible for Arsenal during a season. Secondly, when you're
then
looking,
it's about defining the targets, then, right, Tom? So
absolutely.
What is an obtainable target?
Challenging
when they sit
for those,
down with the board,
challenging for those titles.
Do you think it's challenging, or do you think they say, no, we're expecting, with what we've done in terms of the investment, squad building, etc., our expectation is that we can win the league? Or do you saying our expectation is that we can challenge for the league?
I think they will be saying that the aim is to win everything that they enter. But the expectation is that we show meaningful progress in towards trying to win them, is what I would be expecting for them. Because if the idea is that your expectation is that you beat Man City, when you factor in everything that Man City is up against what we are and what we have and the spending over the last 8 years, and I know Guardiola says Arsenal have spent more or whatever in the last 5 years. It's not just about that. He's very clever in the way he uses that as an example. Because if you look at the spending compared to when Pep Guardiola came into Manchester City rather than when Arteta came into Arsenal, the difference is significant. It's hundreds of millions.
Oh yeah, I agree. It's very selective. Selective using of the statistics.
But when you're looking at this position of extending the contract, Arsenal are in a position right now where they have established themselves as a challenger to Man City, who, if we're being very honest, very few people thought Arteta would ever achieve when he was first appointed as Arsenal manager. I think people thought he might turn it around, but I don't think at that time, after however many years we've been left in the purgatorial state this club has of trying to get back into the top four, that they thought that he was going to establish us as title challengers, finishing just 2 points off arguably the most impressive, competitive, consistent, most highest points achieving side that we've ever seen in this Premier League. So I think that when they'll do his performance review, they'll see the fact that every single year he has gone forwards with Arsenal. He's achieved more points. His team has scored more goals. He's got closer to the main rival that we have, and that he has earned the right to continue that mission to try and overhaul them. So that's where I think there is a difference between a sales rep, for instance, and what they're doing in terms of their chances with the analogy that you've used, and a football manager in a space where at the end of contract, if you don't renew it, which we all know will include a pay rise, because that's what happens in every single contract renewal, be it a player or a manager, when they renew their contracts, because of the length of careers in this sport, they include a pay rise. That's just the expectation of every contract. It may not be significant always, but there is always a pay rise because that's the sport. So when it comes to looking at that position, there was always going to be a renewal. There was always going to be a pay rise. But for me, it's now about this next 3-year period. That KPI, as you want to talk about it as, for me, has to return a Premier League in these next 3 years. Because if he doesn't, what we've learned is that if you are within 2 points of your biggest rival after this many years, and with 3 more years, you can't therefore go and win the league, I think it means you've taken us as far as you can take us. And so it's then when you need to look at who needs to come in and replace at that point, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you in that regard. And look, I understand there's a few more people waiting, so I want to respect your time. But with regards
man, I appreciate you calling in.
This contract renewal, the way I see it is the board appointed Arteta because they saw something in him that, granted, a lot of fans we did not see, but they saw the ability for him to take the team to this level and potentially further on. At the moment, I think he's performing well in the league, granted. I do think in the other cups, it's quite disappointing, let's be honest. And sometimes squad management, I don't even want to get into another sort of discussion that can take us. Yeah. But for me, they have seen it fine to reward him with a contract extension, which takes him to the second highest paid manager in the league. Okay, that's fine. But that should come with some expectation
right now, to be fair.
Yeah, in terms of the Premier League, but that should come with some other expectations, and I'm sure
I think it does. Do you honestly, just last question, LJ, do you honestly not think that the ownership, and from what Arteta said, and his quote, of course, was when he was said what he wants to achieve in the next however many years, he said, I would say a lot of major trophies. That's not just the Premier League. That's Champions League. That's FA Cup. The League Cup is always a bit of a weird one for me. I think it's a discussion for another day. Like, everybody rotates in that competition, bar Man City, but even then Man City do, but they've got such a deep squad full of so many players at this point after 8 to 10 years of building that squad under Pep Guardiola and previously the manager before that. They're always going to be in a better position to compete at this point. But in the FA Cup in the last 2 seasons, obviously we've been knocked out by Liverpool and we've been knocked out by Manchester City. Arsenal this, obviously, I would expect to go further. And even if we get those teams, I hope that we can better compete against them than we have before. You know, last season we didn't lose to either of those 2 teams in a domestic fashion in the league. So I'd expect us to do better on both those fronts, and especially with the depth that we have compared to last season to a degree as well. I just think that this idea that Arsenal and the Cronkies and the ownership and Edu don't have an expectation that they want to win, I just think, with respect, is a little naive from my point of view.
No, so just to sort of conclude on what my expectation is. My expectation, I'm going to hold the club to what some of the quotations that came out yesterday. So I am expecting within the duration of this next contract extension for the club to be in receipt of a number of major honours, whether that be a Premier League, a Champions League, with a few other domestic cups. So that is my expectation, and I think they've made that clear, so I can hold them to it. And if he doesn't achieve that, then I think it's fair to say, look, it's just not happening. Speaking about the Carabao Cup really quickly, I always find it really interesting that when Pep Guardiola came, he used it as a building block for further success. The same with Jose Mourinho. So I think there's something that history tells us that certain managers have used it to install a winning ethic. So I don't think it would. I think it would bemoan Arteta to just completely ignore it as something that isn't worth concentrating on at all, because it seems like it can be a good building block for further success. So I'm going to hold the club to what they say.
Yeah, of course.
I'm going to leave it as that for now.
Yeah.
And then we'll catch up at the end of the season when I genuinely believe we should be lifting up the Premier League at the very least.
It's that very least thing that is where I struggle. And obviously, I know that you said like the few trophies. You said that we should be expecting a few trophies. What I always find interesting is that in 9 years that Jurgen Klopp was at Liverpool, after taking on Brendan Rodgers' side that, of course, competed for a title against Manchester City during his tenure, of course, something that Arsenal under Arteta previous to him never did for more than 10 years. Klopp picked up 1 league, 1 FA Cup, the Champions League, and a couple of League Cups during that 9-year run. So if we're saying that after he's taken arguably the second best manager in the last recent memory under Pep Guardiola, has achieved that, 1 league, 1 FA Cup, 1 Champions League and a couple of League Cups in those 9 years, despite taking on a Liverpool team that was far better than the team that Arteta took over when he got it in 2019. I just think that maybe gives a better perspective on what challenge awaits Arsenal compared to what challenge awaited Jurgen Klopp.
I respect that, but I also think with the contract renewal and the remuneration that Arteta's on, the club believe he's better than Jurgen Klopp. So I believe that he should be performing better than Jurgen Klopp from henceforth. But let's leave it
because of the money.
Well, the money is an indication of where they see him in the marketplace, right?
But also the market would naturally inflate over time, would it not?
I mean, Klopp only just finished last season. He never
Yeah, I
achieved
know.
15 million.
So what's
per annum.
Arteta's wage then now?
From what I read yesterday, it was
Where did you
15
read
million per annum.
Where did you
It
read
was one of these aggregators on Twitter who were quoting it from a newspaper article. Apparently, it's 15 million.
Okay, I'm doing a quick Google, and I'm not seeing that number.
What I'll do is I'll try and follow up.
I'm seeing 10 at the moment, which is 10 million less than Pep Guardiola's. I'm not sure what
Pep is on 20. I'll try and follow up in the chat. I'm about to start driving again.
But Klopp earned, okay, no worries. Just quickly, Klopp earned 15 million a year at Liverpool. Arteta's now on a 10 million wage. Just that should clarify that for you.
Okay, no worries. I'll double check it as well. But thanks,
cool, man. No worries. Appreciate it, LJ. Thank you. Right. I am extremely conscious of time. So what I'm going to do is I've got 2 more callers, which is Lai and King. What I'm going to ask of you boys is jump in, say a quick 1-minute piece, because I want to get you on, because I don't want to kick you out, and then we'll wrap up. So Lai, you're up first. Give us your piece on Arteta. I won't interrupt you because I'm conscious of time. Tell me what you're thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I've been sitting around a lot. I don't see, like I don't have any problem at all with the renewal. I think a lot of the I don't want to call it hysteria. People are going to say whatever they're going to say anyway, regardless of whether or not it was renewed or not. I don't understand the idea that he should go on to the end of the season before and see whether he wins something before they renew the contract. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. Like you do not operate like that when you are working with players. I don't see why you would operate like that while you're working with a coach as well. So and the fact that you renew a contract doesn't mean that if things go wrong, you cannot do anything about it. So so that's on the one piece. On the other piece, in terms of players coming in or whether it should be what are the expectations and all of that, my view has always been that it depends. It depends. So we cannot sit here and pretend like there is a coach that you can guarantee that will beat Pep Guardiola. People sit out here and talk about this man being the greatest coach in the history of the Premier League. Okay, we do not have the greatest coach in the history of the Premier League. Sometimes the way I flip the question back is this. If you give Pep the Arsenal team and you give Arteta the City team, who wins? Do you think Pep wins with this team? Wins. Exactly. That is my view. Some people will say, "Oh, Pep will win." I mean, really, you think? Pep
I think it would still be really close.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately the depth that City have, the fact they have the best player in the world in Rodri, the best striker in the world in Haaland, would see them win it overall.
Exactly.
And I think that's not to take away how good of a coach Arteta is or how good of a coach Guardiola is. It's one to say that they're both really good coaches. Guardiola in particular, as the best coach in the world, arguably. But I do think that the resources that City have and the team they currently have would still see them edge it.
That is my view as well. And I think if you are any fair thinking person, you would at least say, if Arteta is taking it to the final day with his Arsenal team, with the City team, he has an excellent chance of beating Pep if the roles were flipped. So because you cannot tell me that the team in general is as good as the City team.
I suppose I said I wouldn't interrupt and I'm already lying. I think what's interesting is that at that point, I think it's a really interesting point. If you ask anyone who has the better team, Man City or Arsenal, you will struggle to find anyone that says Arsenal, right?
Exactly.
I mean, even the biggest critics of Arsenal couldn't, because they'd look massive hypocrites about the business we've done to say suddenly we have a better team than Man City. So if we're saying that Man City have a categorically, unequivocal, indebatable better team than Arsenal, if Arsenal, under Arteta, win the league and beat that Man City team, that would be, on paper, therefore, one of the most unbelievable footballing achievements in Premier League history.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I totally agree. And
And we finished 2 points off doing that, for the record.
And one quick last point. Talking a little bit about the transfers, I feel like a lot of people are mad and not happy, and rightly so, at the fact that we didn't bring in forward, right? Because the idea is that, City has this monster up front. And I gave some thought to that. And quite frankly, I feel like they've actually been telling us how they operate. It's just a question of whether we agree with it or whether we see it like that. So 2 seasons ago, when Arsenal went to Newcastle and he started with a midfield of Jorginho and Xhaka.
Yes.
Everyone thought we're going to bring Partey because I think he was injured and it was on the bench, and we beat them 2-0. This was in Newcastle, and they asked him after the game, like, hey, that was a very physical team, etc., etc. Like, why did he decide to go with Xhaka and Jorginho? Because everyone looks at Jorginho as not physical at all, like, small against Joel Linton and all of these other guys, Grammarian. He said, my focus is not to think about what our weaknesses are, it's to double down on our strength. Yeah. Now, when you look at the team and how they approached the transfer window, I think that was exactly what they did. We are the best team defensively. If you say you're going to go toe-to-toe with City on the offensive side, that doesn't make any sense. You're not going to find another Erling Haaland. So I think in his mind, it thinks to himself, like, yes, let's bring in a few, but let's try and reinforce a little bit the offensive side, but really strengthen our strength, which is defense, which is why I brought in Calafiori and Merino and all of these other guys. So in his mind, I think he's thinking, look, I back the team to score 1 goal or 2 goals in majority of the teams that we play. But the question for us is going to be, can we do? Because it doesn't matter how many hat tricks Haaland scores, they're only going to get 3 points. So and yes, that looks scary, but you're not going to focus on that and always having them live rent-free in his head. So that, I think, is approach, and which from us as fans, we probably are not strategic in that way. We don't think of football that way. We always think, oh my God, look at what other person is doing. I mean, it's the same thing that a lot of our fans did when Spurs signed what's his name from Leicester last season. They talked about Maddison. Talked about how we could have gotten Maddison, but we got Haaland like all season long, and we saw how that ended. So but anyway, I'm gonna stop rambling, and yes, thanks for doing this show, and that was what.
Of course, man. I appreciate your insight. Thank you so much for jumping on. Thank you, mate. Lovely stuff. Yeah, I think it spoke fantastically well there and really summed it up. Right, we are running out of time because I've got 10 minutes until I'm trying to buy Linkin Park tickets. King, talk to me, mate. Finish off the show in style as usual.
Yes. So first of all, for me, Arteta was always gonna get a contract renewal. They were either gonna sack him if they didn't believe in him, or they were gonna renew his contract. They were not gonna go into the season having that situation unnecessarily. Like, there is no reason to not renew a manager's contract unless you don't believe that he's good enough. Like with Manchester United and Erik ten Hag, where they were forced to just add a 1-year contract because you don't want your manager's contract to run down, because it creates so much uncertainty. You will get media attention, you will get fans questioning, and you will have players and agents questioning what is the long-term strategy of this club. And you cannot tell them that we have a long-term strategy if we don't have the manager on long-term. So obviously, it was the right decision to renew his contract. I think for the people who are not convinced that Arteta is good enough to be the manager, they will never be convinced. They will always find an excuse. It's always like, oh, but he won it with Emery's players. But
which was actually a bigger achievement than.
Yeah, but that's my point. because
He won
Emery
he
could
won
not
the FA
win.
Cup with a team
Yeah.
that was fractured and broken when Emery was sacked, and they're like, but it was Emery's team, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, yeah.
But Emery didn't win with Emery's team. So obviously, if Arteta comes on and
Yeah.
win with his team, that's a big achievement.
Yeah.
But again, they can never see anything positive. It's not like, for me, for example, when Arteta just joined Arsenal, I was skeptical because I felt like we were in our biggest crisis in modern time. The club was divided. The players were not committed to the club. The fans was falling out from the club. So the club itself was not in a good space. I think people forget how poor we were as a club. I'm not just talking about on the pitch, but off the pitch, player contract, age-wise, profiles. It was just a mess. And then you had the whole role situation with certain deals that he was doing. So there was a lot of things that was wrong with Arsenal. And to join us as your first job in our biggest crisis in history is you have to be very brave to believe in yourself to do that. You have to have a certain kind of winner mentality to believe that you can turn that around. And here we are, fast forward 4 years later, and Arteta has turned it around. For me, you cannot say that he bottled it last year. He lost to the greatest Premier League team, and for me, the greatest Premier League manager we've seen. And it was just a one-game swing. A one-game swing, Tom, is luck. That's where your luck kicks in.
Yeah.
So Trossard scored that goal in the first half against Aston Villa. We go on and win the league.
Yeah.
That's not.
Jorginho doesn't make the mistake against Spurs in the first half of the season. If Saka doesn't pass it back against Fulham, if we're given the penalty away at Aston Villa, if we actually take our 77 touches in the box against West Ham, any of those things are different, and it's the difference between a league and not. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't look at that as like, oh, tactically we're not good enough, or the manager is not good enough, or the players are not good enough. Surely, when you win the amount of game we win, we score the amount of goals we scored, and you concede as less goals as we did, and kept as many clean sheets as we did, you are an elite team. So then we go again and we break it down. So we have a manager who keeps on improving every year, keeps getting closer to Man City every year.
Yeah.
And him himself at the things that we used to look at, like, oh, in-game management is too poor, or if something comes up, he can't change it up. All of that is improved. The only thing you can stick on Arteta is that cup runs, he should do better.
Yeah.
And that's the cup runs from back in the days in the Europa League up until last year. I think if we are holding him as high as we do, then we can say that Bayern is probably the only team that was better than us that we couldn't beat. So I feel like when we met Liverpool in the FA Cup, I feel like we were a better team than them last year. I felt like we were a better team than West Ham. And I felt like we've had a few cup runs where we've underachieved. And that is something that he's going to have to improve on, because sometimes doing well in the cup runs can give you that confidence and belief to push you on to win something.
Yeah, and I think that maybe that is the biggest benefit of the League Cup, is obviously how early in the season it is. But King, always a pleasure, my friend, to speak with you, and I hope you're doing well. How's Sweden? Is it nice? Is it good?
Yeah, it's good. You can see the sun is out, so it's really good. Thank you for having me on. We'll catch up, and big up to everyone that's tuned in today. Well spoken.
Thank you, mate. Appreciate it, and pleasure to see you as always, my friend. See you soon.
See you. Bye.
Thanks, King. Lovely stuff. And that rounds us off today. Thank you so much, as always, tuning in. I'm wrapping this up quick because I've got 4 minutes to jump into a Lincoln Park queue to buy tickets, which I'm hoping for. Fingers crossed. Thank you, as always, for listening. Do drop a like on the video. Do subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. I'll be back with you tomorrow morning, of course, from Ireland tomorrow to round up all the latest Arsenal news ahead of a big day for one of our listeners. And have a fantastic rest of your afternoon, evenings, mornings, wherever you happen to be in the world. And I'll speak to you then. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal. just a quick thing before we wrap up. Thank you, Carl, for your super chat. I'm really sorry I missed it at the end. People's expectations are crazy. For comparison, look at the Dodgers in the MLB. Spend the most year after year one title since 1988. Calm down, people. Carl, you finished off the show in the best way. Thank you, mate. And sorry I missed it.